In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Welcome to Be the Wellness Podcast, where we help you master your body, mind, and the experience of life through insightful conversation, interviews with experts and thought leaders, all with a side of marital banter and some good old-fashioned humor.
Yes, we are your hosts, Adam and Vanessa Lambert, and we're committed to helping you live life fully expressed physically, mentally, and experientially. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation.
Check your booty.
That could not have been a better intro to the podcast. Like, frankly, it's like there's nothing else to say. Here we are, Adam and Vanessa Lambert and Benjamin.
Yo, yo, yo.
Back with another. Well, this is episode 3 of Mocktails with Ben, right?
Episode 3 in the last,
3 years?
3 years?
1 a year. We're on a roll.
That's pretty awesome. So we are coming at you guys from Humboldt County up here in the Redwoods. And Benjamin was making his way from Los Angeles up to Portland to eventually Washington. And we had the pleasure of having him stop in and hang out for a couple days.
Yeah. It's been amazing.
The magic of the Redwoods, huh?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It is magical. These trees, like, I haven't seen them in years since I was a kid, and they're still huge. I've gotten bigger. Sometimes you're like, oh, trees get smaller, but no, these ones are still big.
Well, we came up here a few weeks ago and we did this hike, this magical hike that I've been spouting about for weeks. And when we saw you last weekend for my birthday, I was like, Benjamin, do you want to go back to Humboldt with us and do this hike? And you were like,
yes. Let's make it happen.
So we did. Yeah. We came back up here and I feel like I'm literally addicted to the Redwoods right now. It's just so good, such good energy.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's exactly what I was going for. You know, I bought a van, and it's a minivan, and I converted it to like a little camper. Mm-hmm. And I just took it out, went north from Los Angeles, tried to avoid the fires here and there. It's kind of a bit bad timing on my part, but whatever.
Everything's on fire right now.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was super fun. We found some amazing spots. There's this one spot in the Sierras that was just like, it's a hot spring spot. I almost don't want to say the name on this podcast to keep it like my own, because it was so great. I'll say it. It's Mono Hot Springs.
Yeah.
And holy cow, that place was insane. It's beautiful. It's like everything I love, like good hiking, lots of big boulders, and amazing fresh water stream, and I get to swim in, and it's amazing. You know, that's what I go for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a cool spot. And it's now on fire.
I know. 2 days after I left, they airlifted 200 people out. Yeah. The National Guard did.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah. People were stuck up in there somewhere
at Huntington Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where they were stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a trip, man. It's like everything just sort of switched here in the state. It was like a pretty normal year. I mean, you know, aside from the COVID and whatnot. Well,
it was the fires. It started with the fires in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it just started ramping up from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they spread to here. And here we go. You know?
Yeah.
Well, fire season usually does kick in this time of year, to be fair. It's like late August, early September, when everything's sufficiently dried out, right before the rains come. It's like that final hurrah. So it's like, yes, no?
Adam would know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really depends, you know, but I mean, it is true. Like the last, I would say 5 years, it's been later, you know what I mean? Like fall time is when everything gets cracking. But like at the beginning of 2019, there was hardly any fires. It was like a, it was a non-ordeal, when you look at and compare it to 2017, 18, 2020, which are all like pretty significant fire years. 2019 was kind of like, whatever, and it's because there was rain.
Mm-hmm.
There was significant rain, significant snowpack. It's just how it works.
Yeah.
And so, like, with the exception of that year, we're still sort of riding the tails of the last drought, right? So everything's kind of gnarly. And then you get a lightning bust like we had here at, the beginning of last month. Yeah, I guess beginning of August was when that little lightning show came to town and blew everything up, And so then, like, what ends up happening is everybody gets super taxed. There's so many fires that like the resources go to drawdown level, and then like everything else, just like Joe Blow mowing his lawn catches something on fire. There's not enough resources to overwhelm it like we normally would. Right. So,
yeah. Does your listeners sufficiently know that you were a firefighter for 25 years, right?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
So I actually have a question for you, because I think about this all the time when I see the press and I see like reports about the fires. What are your thoughts about it? Like these fires, that are they actually bigger and burning hotter and more destructive? If so, is that because of global warming and climate change, or is it poor forest management? Is it a combination of all of the above?
Well, that's like the, well, let's see. When I left the department, that was like the $375 million question. But I think what it comes down to is it really is all of the above. I think, there's definitely a lot more media coverage and a lot more sort of, documentaries that are sponsored by environmental groups, talking about fires and all of this. So there's definitely like a whole thing around it now that makes it seem like it's a drastically worse new problem. Yeah. And it really isn't, like it's been, so 2008, we had a significant lightning bust, very similar to this one, did exactly the same things, caused the same problems. There was fires everywhere. The entire state of California was smoked out. It was, but it was 12 years ago, right? People forget pretty quickly. And, so the kind of catastrophic fires that we've had in the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years, is kind of different, like we've had like, the fire that consumed the entire town of Paradise, what I mean? That was fairly unprecedented, from like a recent history perspective. But this is the thing that's kind of where it gets hard, at least for me to discern, right? So you could look at it and you say, oh my God, we've never seen fires like this. So it must be this climate change problem. And I'm not saying that it isn't that, but I also think that we have to look at like a much longer time frame when we say we've never seen fires like this before, because that's just not really true. Like we haven't necessarily, as like white people in California, you know what I mean? It's like we haven't been here that long, and we know that these fires run on pretty long cycles, and that this whole thing kind of shifts. So it's certainly, novel from our perspective. But the other things that we have to kind of look at is like, have we had catastrophic timber fires, meaning, fires that ripped through crown and canopy of timber and like left moonscapes in what would be, otherwise forests? And like, has that occurred in California and other places? Yeah, the answer is absolutely yes, it has. The difference now, compared to those kind of fires occurring 100 years ago, is that now that there's towns that are built in these, forests, right? And so it's really, it's on one hand, it's kind of a simple thing. You're like, okay, more humans means more fires that get started. More humans means more people living out in the woods. So it's more, it's more difficult to manage fire in that kind of scenario because nobody wants controlled burning in their backyard. There's like all of this kind of stuff that goes along, and it should be fairly obvious that like we are creating this problem, and it's not that we're creating it from the perspective of, the climate has warmed up 2 degrees and now all of a sudden it just catches on fire. It's like, no, it's much more, we're way more ingrained in it than that. We're causing problems through improper land use planning. We're, and all of this stuff, like for the most part, is like us trying to do something good. You know, oh, we don't want to emit, you know, all of this carbon into the atmosphere, and we don't want to, you know, ruin the air quality. So we're no longer going to do prescribed burning, you know, but all right, well, these fires, I mean, the fire is a natural part of the ecology in California, you know, depending on whether it's in the Redwoods or in the Chaparral or wherever. I mean, this state has burned forever, you know, and as soon as you stop or start messing with the cycle, then you're opening yourself up to just this kind of, you know, can of worms situation, or you're playing whack-a-mole, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it's so interesting being in the trees the last few days, and you just see like these humongous redwood trees that have burnt out sections or scarred sections from fire, but they completely survive it. And I think like exactly what you're saying, it's because, you know, a lot of these fires are on the forest floor, and they're just really cleaning and clearing the floors of the forest, and also regeneration and like allowing the new seedlings to be exploded. What, I don't know, exploded. Sure, thank you. I didn't have that one. But, you know, I think that like you can see it in the forest, like how much the fire is part of the story of the forest. But like you said, and I even remember this working for CAL FIRE, is that when a fire begins, pretty much the number one objective from the California side of it is to put the fire out, right? To save homes, to save land, to save resources. Whereas the Forest Service, which is the United States sort of forest, or the federal fire companies, are more interested in fire management rather than extinguishment. And so that's where, again, we probably see a lot more issues in California as a whole, because we have traditionally just extinguished it instead of managing it. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So it's the real issue though. So yeah, so the state of California's mission is to keep 95% of fires under 10 acres or less. And you know, and that is, you know, the primary goal is to save life and then resources and then property, right? And so resources are the watersheds and the timber and all of that kind of stuff, right? So life is first, then the resources, then the property, meaning your house that we built out in the weeds. And so, you know, when that whole thing came about, it was like, look, we're going to prevent these fires, these fires that are happening or not prevent, but we're going to, you know, contain these fires, 10 acres or less. These are fires that are burning on days that we would not deem appropriate for controlled burns, right? Like the middle of summer on a super windy day. It's a fire that you don't want to have happen, right? But there also used to be a component in the wintertime and the kind of shoulder months of fire season that was a vegetation management program where we did prescribed fire and went and, you know, tried to replicate the kind of natural cycles that occur from what would be like a lightning strike. And so, you know, a lightning strike would come with a little bit of rain and it would slowly burn and consume the ground fuels. And it's like it's a high quality fire. Like that's the kind of thing you want. And so we've tried to replicate that, you know, and in this sort of interplay between people moving into the forest and us still needing to be able to manage the forest, right? And so that has become more and more difficult, and it's actually happens less and less. So prescribed fire is a very difficult thing to get done in California now, you know, and for all kinds of reasons, but a lot of it is air quality. Well, there's a few sort of key things. There's the air quality management piece because nobody wants the smoke, right? There's an absolute fear of fire because you do occasionally lose control burns and it burns down other people's property, right? So there's that aspect of it. And then there's this like, I mean, that's kind of on the like public perception and policy side of it. And then I want to say it was like 2001, there was an assembly bill that was passed in California. And then I think it actually did end up spreading kind of at a national level that basically put the onus, it put individual and personal responsibility on the incident commander for lost fires, right? So like you are ultimately culpable personally if a controlled burn that you are operating gets out of control and damages somebody's property. And so that changed.
That's not cool.
No, dude, it really isn't. And in fact, like what ended up happening after the fact, it like didn't end up being that big of a deal. I don't know anyone who was personally sued or anything, but people bought all these crazy umbrella policies and all of this stuff. But it shifted the mindset, you know, and all of a sudden people were like, "Whoa, man, well, I'm not not risking my career just to make sure that, this private piece of property, this ranch gets burned or whatever. It really shifted the way that everybody thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have these kind of, these strange intertwining like forces that just lead to, this problem where we're in right now, where we're coming on the tail end of what was a really significant drought. We haven't had meaningful rainfall with the exception of 2019. The climate is warming up, and I don't think that the temperature is the problem that we're facing right now. What I think is the big contributing factor to the catastrophic fires that have occurred in California is wind. And so what we're seeing is like the prevalence of the Diablo winds in the north and the Santa Ana winds in the south. And like, you're kind of seeing this switching of it, right? So it used to always be in the fall, we could count on Santa Ana's blowing in Southern California, and, San Diego, Riverside, Ventura, all of those counties just get, a fire that blows out to the ocean. Right. And then, as soon as the Santa Anas are over, the fog pushes in, puts the fire out. Like, that's just kind of how that, and when you look at it from that perspective, you can just see how that climate down there and how it's the brush model, the chaparral that they have. That's how it operates. It like slicks off, and then the coast comes in and puts the fire out. And in fact, like when I worked in San Diego, we'd get fires on the border, like on the border with Mexico. So the fire would be, half the fire would be in California, the other half would be in Mexico. And we would spend $1 million, $2 million a day fighting the fire on our side of the border. And there'd be like 4 dudes with like palm fronds and a 4-wheeler on the other side. And the fires would go out about the same time. You know what I mean? Like and obviously, like, a huge piece of what we're doing with our suppression efforts is protecting the lives and the property that are in the path of that fire. Right. And there's a lot more of that on our side of the border than there is on the other. Right. But as far as the actual fire goes, it gets you an interesting like study of how this used to go down. The fire would start, the wind would blow it towards the coast. When the onshore, when it switches to onshore, the fog comes in, pushes the fire back on itself, it goes out. I mean, this is just how this whole cycle works, And so now, though, we are seeing these crazy winds that are not unheard of. They still have names like the Diablo winds, which are the kind of north winds that hit in Northern California, but it's not quite as prevalent as it used to be. And I imagine that is kind of like, that's the climate change that we're seeing. Right. And when you blow on a fire, it goes. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on,
Yeah.
Anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's really awesome, because I actually kind of get in the weeds when I see people, kind of skewing the fire thing towards just climate change. And then there's, all of this talk about poor, improper forest management. And it just makes me feel like I actually really think that like it's a nice opportunity to talk to someone who actually like knows the ins and outs of why these fires occur. And, because I find that like sometimes when I see, people really postulating this thing about like, we got to vote against the climate change deniers and all the things. And it's like, that's fine, whatever. But I'm always like, but I don't know that that's actually really what is causing this 100%,
Yeah. And actually, and so it's a really good point, because there's a thing of environmentalism, right? And like, there's an ism at the end of it, because there's like belief structure around it. Right. And there's no doubt that there's misinformation around the climate and how to deal with it on all sides. Right. It's really complicated. Humans have a 0% success rate of like fucking with nature and having it work out. Like every time we get involved, something gets worse. Like it just really needs to run its course, like it's just how the whole thing works. So, but, we definitely, the Pacific Northwest, California specifically, we have a history of really bad logging practices. The turn of the century logging around here left scars, from a I don't know, kind of a metaphorical perspective that we're still paying for, right? So it was bad logging practices that set up, an understory of dead and downed fuels filled with the brush that grows up beneath it, with, that kind of leads itself to and actually like too many trees is the result of that, right? So like if you go into like what we've been walking around here in these old growth redwoods, there's a tree every 50 to 60 feet, and then the rest of everything on the ground is like a tree that felled 50 years ago, and like all of the little shrubs and clover and stuff, it's all very low, ground clutter. There's not that
much fuel on the ground.
Yeah. And what is there is sort of relegated to the ground. There's no ladder fuels is what you call them, right? It's this intermediary steps of fuel to take a ground fire from the ground to the canopy. All of that's gone. And the thing that removes it is ground fire. In the redwoods, it's like every 6 to 25 years is kind of the cycle. And the fact that there's the canopies are basically shading everything from the ground. So there's no brush that's going to grow down there because it can't get enough light. And so when you go in and you log and you kind of clear cut and you make these massive gaps, now the light can get in and all of the shrub brush and the scrub oak and all of the stuff gets a foothold and then can grow, right? And in fact, it'll choke out some of the trees that would be growing in to kind of finish this. And I mean, this is a broad generalization. Like I'm not a forester, but I think this like speaks to kind of the overall problem. So we have this, this problem that started by cutting down too many trees that led to a problem of having too many trees too close together without thick enough canopy. And now, here we are putting these fires out for the last 100 years, for the most part, allowing more and more buildup and more of this sort of tree growth. And it's really led to a overforestation problem. And and that's the part that is really hard to get around the kind of environmentalism component of it, is that the answer is more logging. It just needs to be good logging. It needs to be not what we did in 1910, but like what's actually possible now. And that's the part that it's just really hard. It's really hard to get past the, sins of our fathers, so to speak.
So what is good logging?
Selective thinning, right? So it's selective going through and you're picking out the trees. And again, I'm starting to bat pretty far out of my league on like how it's supposed to work specifically, but it's selective thinning, allowing, and depending on the model, I want to say in regular kind of what you call pine or fir, sort of conifer forest, it's like a tree every 10 feet kind of thing. Seems to be something that I've heard multiple times. But then a big piece of it is how you actually clean up after yourself. So you're not leaving dead and down of big piles of limbs and stuff, right? So like this is part of the problem is you dump the tree and then you limb it and buck it all up, and then they skid the logs out and leave all of the limbs. And that's a massive fuel load that, wouldn't normally be there. So it looks more like low ground pressure tractors, right? Things that aren't going to disturb the ground as much, and removing or chipping, like basically like speeding up the degradation process of all of that extra fuel that you might be leaving behind.
Turn them into little chips and spread them around.
Yeah. Which, I mean, when you walk around the forest here, that's what you're walking on. You're walking on this awesome bed of decomposing, redwood that's like soft and quiet and super cool. Right. But when it's, big chunks, it just takes a really long time to do.
Yeah.
So it looks something like that, and then like so down in Mono Lakes in that area, the Southern Sierra and Central Sierra of California, I mean, that's the area that's been hit the hardest by the bark beetle. And that's what's going on there. I mean, the bark beetle, these trees are just drought stressed for long enough. I mean, the bark beetle first showed up, I want to say in like Lake Arrowhead in like 2008. And it's been on the move, marching north as we've had all the way through this last drought, as the trees start to become more and more stressed, as the snowpack has been diminished year after year. And it's just boom, 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 and there's just a rust belt essentially that goes through those forests. And, in Lake Arrowhead, they got very aggressive about taking out these trees. It was a massive
So project. The bark beetle kills the trees and the trees fall and it becomes ground fuel?
They don't fall. That's the problem. So they stand. And then you get sustained crown fire running through these trees.
So does that become ladder fuel then?
Yeah, I mean, there's ladder fuels and stuff to get up in there, but once the canopy is burning, then it can run through the canopy. So you get in like sustained crown fire is like it's a really significant problem, right? Because then even if you have let's say you have a patch of, bark beetle, bug kill that's, 100 acres or something, and it's surrounded by, really good high quality timber. If the fire gets going in there with enough wind, it'll just rip through all of the good timber too. So I mean, it's a real problem, but what's interesting about it is that you see where that whole thing stops is in Yosemite, where there has not been logging. Like this cycle did not start there. You know what I mean? And so it's just a really good indication that it's like, okay, we did this in the beginning, right? We have examples within the state of California that are under the exact same climate pressures as everywhere else that are actually doing just fine. And so you can see it's like the thing that the catalyst for all of this was shit forest management at the turn of the century.
Right.
And we just haven't done a good job of, fixing it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So to sum up, like if we're going to fix it, what do we need to do? We need to selective thinning.
Yeah. We
need to somehow do controlled burns to clean up the fuel.
Yeah.
What else do we need to do?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the beginning, and then the other piece that sort of ties in, is, there's a real opportunity to bring groundwater back through, regenerative agriculture practices. So it's like bringing cattle back in to some of these places, because the timber is one thing, but how do we, once the timber's been burned and it's kind of slicked off, like that starts a really long process of, okay, how do we reforest this? And like the battalion that I had in San Diego, we had a project there that was a 240-year reforestation project. So the place got nuked in 2003, again in 2007, and then you're left with brush and planting trees every single year to try to bring this back, And there's actually some pretty interesting stuff that's going on now with cows and regenerative ag. I mean, it's like we talked about a couple podcasts ago with Joel Salatin. It's the same thing with the grasslands and the wetlands. You bring in the herbivores, you let them eat, and you let them move around, and they compost, and they do everything that the grassland needs to generate, and there's some thought that might actually work in these sort of fire damaged areas. As the grass and the brush start to grow back up, you just run the cows through there
in between the trees and let them clean it up.
Let them just mash everything down, and I imagine there's a point in there where it's like your starter trees have to be somewhere, but I don't know, they're talking about it anyway. So I think there's mechanical and biological fixes for this, but these are long projects, 240 years. Like this is something we need to make a decision about and like keep on marching. You know what I mean? Understanding that us or our kids or our grandkids, are never going to see the result, and I think that's the part that's really hard when it comes to like making these decisions about what actually needs to occur. Is it's such a long time horizon. And we've never done it. Like that's the other part is like, it's all hypothetical. Like we've never really seen any of this stuff through to fruition. I mean, our foresters and all these guys are super smart. They understand how all of this stuff works. And they often don't really get listened to, when it comes to, because the stuff's very political too, right? Is another aspect of it.
Yeah. I mean, America's not that great at long-term like vision anyways, it seems. That's super interesting.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, there's like two things that have to happen. I mean, there has to be like the political will on the government side of it to make and to stand up and try to explain how this is going to have to go, and that we're going to have to cut trees for it to work, and that you may not get to build the house that you want to build on your 160 acres in the middle of the freaking woods. Or if you do, it's not going to get protected in the event of fire, or you're going to have to do all of these extra things to ensure that your house doesn't start a fire in the woods, right?
A 30-foot steel wall.
Yeah. Like Australia, right? The fire fence, right? So there's some stuff around that I think needs to occur. But the other piece of it too is like the privatized timber industry. I mean, they have the profit motive and incentive to make this stuff work correctly, and they battle regulations. And I'm not saying the regulations shouldn't be there. Like the regulations were a knee-jerk reaction to a completely out of control industry. But there really needs to be like everybody needs to come to the table and say, okay, look, here's how we're going to do this in California, whether it's private or state or federal land. Like we need to all be on the same page, you know. And I'm not super optimistic that you get all those people in the same room. But I mean, that's what it comes to, at least with the private companies, the profit motive, they do see the long game, you know. I mean, you're growing a crop that, you know, could take 50 to 100 years to harvest. Like you definitely are playing a long game. So I don't know. Yeah. But it's crazy.
That's really interesting, though. And I mean, obviously, it's such a pressing subject for us here in California.
Yeah. It's a pressing subject for everybody, because even people that are in the big cities all around the West Coast, it's like they've never seen this kind of smoke roll through a big city in their lifetimes. Yeah. It's like it was insane in Los Angeles, and in Portland, Oregon, we had air quality of above 500 for a couple of days, which is like totally hazardous. And I think a lot of people are waking up and just wondering what's going on here. Like, what do we need to learn in order to figure this out?
Yeah. It's so crazy because even Adam's mom was evacuated in Talent, Oregon, which is just north of Ashland. And we were watching some of the video trying to figure out like if her house burned down or not. And there was no response team. Like there was no firefighters. There was nothing. Like the town was burning. And Adam remarked that they're just not prepared for that. Like they don't have fires like that. So they're not California staffed in the way that we are, where we expect that every year. And it was just crazy. Like
Oregon doesn't get that.
It was a ghost town. Yeah.
And that's, you know, And the thing is like, we've been doing this in California for 100 years, and we've been doing it in the way that, like, more or less what we see today for the last 30 years. You know, it's like, it's really, really just comes down to how many people have moved out to the woods. You know, it's like, it used to be this stuff happened and the only people that worried about it were the timber companies. They're like, well, it's like, this is our resources burning. But as soon as the urban sprawl occurs, you know, now it's a big deal everywhere, you know? And so we've been doing this. Like, this is the thing, the rapidly expanding incident, right? Is what we used to call them. The wind driven fires burning through suburban neighborhoods. And like all of this kind of stuff is like California's bread and butter. And we still get overwhelmed with it. You know what I mean? It's like, look at what's happening right now. There's literally fires that are just burning out of control with literally no wind. You know, it's just there's just an amount of fire that gets overwhelming. And so when you go into these smaller communities, you know, and you get a fire that starts and it rips like it's in, you know, Central California or Lake County on a windy day, you got like maybe between Ashland, Talent, Phoenix, Southern Medford, 10 tops fire engines staffed. You know what I mean? It's like, that's nothing. You can't do anything with it. You know, and then they're probably municipal engines, right? So they don't even have like all of the require everything you need to like deal with a fast moving wildland fire. It's like those guys are like totally caught with their pants down, like no matter what, and no fault of their own. You know, it's like you literally cannot legislate the improvement of a fire department fast enough to account for even just the growth of a city, let alone a like somewhat unprecedented, you know, fire danger, like a massive north wind that just shows up, you know, and cracks through your community, you know? So I feel for those folks, man. That's like, that's a bummer. And, you know, we pointed this out a couple of years ago on the podcast. I think we were talking about this in 2017 or 18.
2018 with the Paradise Fire.
I think it was 2017. We talked about it on the podcast, though. Where we were talking about how, because it was the fires in Mendocino, right? And how there were all of these people that died in Redwood Valley for the most part, and in and around Santa Rosa. I think there were a handful, because they did not have the evacuation systems. Like the infrastructure for the evacuation systems were outdated, you know, and it's the pace of change with technology, right? So it's like, how do you evacuate a bunch of people in the middle of the night from their houses? reverse 911 is what it's called, right? So the dispatch hits a button and it calls all of everybody's phone number with a recorded message saying, hey, evacuate immediately. You need to go to X, Y, or Z location, right? Well, nobody has landlines anymore. Everybody has cell phones. Those cell phones are not registered to their addresses. They're not in a database. So like, how do you notify people who no longer have fax machines? They're not fax machines, but they don't have the landline anymore, right? And so like, these are problems that cost a tremendous amount of money to solve at the local government level, right? So like, Mendocino County Sheriff's Department does not have 50 grand, $150,000. I don't even know what to upgrade their reverse 911 system to something that can account for cellular devices, right? So the money doesn't get spent until it gets pressure tested, until it has to, until you have a problem where fire rips through a community in the middle of the night and it kills a bunch of people. And people are like, we didn't even know. How were we supposed to know?
Yeah. It's like, it's hard to know if a problem actually exists or not until it's a problem.
Yeah. Well, and when even people who do know, and like this is the thing that's crazy about the department that I used to work for, is you can bounce all over the state, right? So you can like work in Southern California where you've had a Santa Ana wind problem where like literally this problem has occurred for the last however many, 50 years, 100 years since we've been paying attention to it, where there are communities who don't sleep at night when the Santa Ana winds are blowing because, in their recent history, the entire town burned down right. So there's people that are super on top of this whole thing. There's fire department personnel who have lived through that. And maybe they made it to, maybe they promoted a battalion chief and they transferred to Northern California. And they get up here and they're like, okay, give me the rundown on how our, evacuation warning systems work. And they're like, what? We don't. Oh yeah. Sheriff's Department handles that. And they're like, oh my God, you guys don't have anything that does this. And they're like, yeah, but I mean, we don't really have that problem here, right? And they're like, oh man, we really need to solve this problem. And you're like, okay. And they sell a few people on it and they sell a few people on that. And then it's like, and this is a generalization, but this is really how it works. You get to this point and you're like, okay, well, this is a significant budgetary increase. We need to take it to the Board of Supervisors. You go to the Board of Supervisors and they're like, well, wait a minute. So what you guys are saying is you want X amount of money to prepare for something that's never happened in the past that you think might happen in the future because somebody that came from Southern California says that it happened to them once. Like, we got to fix potholes. We've got a library that's, defunct. We've got, so there's always these competing priorities. And it's, so it's like the fire service in general adapts one catastrophe at a time. Like, it's just how it works,
Yeah. And kind of the world in general does that,
Yeah.
I mean, look at COVID,
Yeah, exactly.
Look at, lots of people, including like Bill Gates, have been, yelling about this for years.
Yeah.
And nobody.
He's just trying to implant chips.
That's true. Then there's Elon Musk who's actually going to do that. And everybody's like, cool.
They're like, no, man, you're going to be able to get this thing. I'm going to put a computer in your brain that's going to read your thoughts. Like, sign me up.
Sign me up. Bill Gates does it? No, thank you.
Creepy. Super creepy. What are you trying to do to me, man? Yeah.
So, speaking of COVID, Benjamin, how's your COVID experience been?
My COVID experience has been okay. Let's see. I was lucky enough to shelter with my parents. My mom's 70th birthday was on March 14th. And so I was already in Spokane, Washington, where I grew up. And then the lockdown happened. I just stayed up there for 3.5 months, which was super nice to have that time with my family. And then I went back to LA on June 23rd. And it was just like a crazy experience going back to LA at that time. Oh my gosh. It was just felt so weird because I live in Venice Beach and it's usually just cracking. There's stuff going on all the time, all year round, especially in the summertime.
Right.
I live right on this street called Abbot Kinney and it's like, it was dead. Businesses were shut down. Businesses had boards on the wall, on the windows because there was recent, BLM protests there. And I was just like, where am I? Yeah. It was so weird. But I was lucky enough, like I didn't lose my job. I have, my consulting gig and and so I had, income and everything was okay for me. Now I'm taking a little bit of a sabbatical, and I'm traveling around and having fun in my new converted van and joining the minivan life.
Yeah.
And now I get to stay in this awesome RV that we're recording this podcast from in the middle of Redwoods. And I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm definitely happy.
So did it bring any, like, I know for me personally, kind of brought to the surface just like some non-negotiables, like things that I just like didn't want to go back to or didn't want to have in my life moving forward anymore. Is there anything that came to the surface where you're like, this is sort of like a line in the sand for me where I don't actually want to carry forward some of these habits or ways of being or thoughts or...
Yeah, definitely. It made me think of my lifestyle and made me desire more of a mobile lifestyle, and it comes with just this energy of remote work. Like, this is now possible in my mind. And I really love that idea because I have so much, so many friends and so many things to do, like all over the place, and so, I mean, we can't go across, U.S. borders right now, but that'll change.
Yeah.
But just within the U.S., it's nice to know that I can go hang out in Spokane and be productive, or I can go back to L.A. and have fun there and be productive. And I'm not set to a physical location. Now I'm gifted in the fact that I'm in tech, and I work in front of a computer, and everything I do is essentially in digital format. And so it doesn't matter where I am physically, as long as I have the connection, I can be productive, which is super cool. And it's nice that my mindset's actually going in that direction. So, and I think the world's going to go in that direction. Like, I'm super sold on this whole idea of remote work and how the value of living in a city anymore is dramatically decreasing. And people are going to start moving out. Not everybody, but some people are going to start moving out, and smaller cities, and people are going to want to, do RV type things and connect with nature like me. That's kind of like my whole thing, is like, I wanted to get in nature more. Living in LA for 10 years, just kind of, it's not too far from nature, but it was still a big city, and I didn't have a car, and I just really got starved for, just being in nature. And it's just like, anyway, so I'm glad that I'm on this journey, to do that. It feels perfect, actually.
Well, what do you think from sort of the viewpoint of your company? Because I'm so curious. I've invented, and I think I've invented it from getting some feedback, but I'm curious to hear your point of view in terms of your company's outlook for keeping things remote. Like, are most companies, do you feel like in tech, going, hey, we really don't need these offices. We really don't need to come back. Like, is that really a systemic change that you think is going to occur?
Yes, it definitely depends on the company. The company that I was working at, that I am working at right now at, called Philosophy, we went completely remote. In fact, we're getting rid of our offices. Now, Philosophy was fortunate because when we work with clients, we generally work with them remotely. They're not always in LA or New York. And so that's been part of our pedigree for a long time. So it's very natural for us to just give up our offices because we're working with our clients remotely, 90% of the time anyways. Other companies, it's not like that, and I think older companies that are really have like a culture that's been around for a long time, it's going to take them a while, Tech is just, we move, so fast that something like this comes around, tech is just easy to innovate and change course. But companies where they have, things that they're making, physical things, like if you're a hardware company and you're making a physical product, well, that has to be manufactured in a physical space, it's like these physical things that, a lot of people are going to be tied to. But Potentially not all the time, though. You'll have to deal with the physical part maybe like 1 week out of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're free for 3 weeks out of the month.
Yeah, that's kind of where I see that there's just a lot more flexibility in negotiation, right? Like the paradigms. And I think this is what's really interesting about COVID is that so many of these old systems are falling and they kind of needed to be reworked. They weren't working for people. I mean, people are, even if you're commuting 30 minutes to work, there and back, that's still an hour of your day. And if you're required to work 8 hours and then you're giving up an additional hour, like think about what that hour could be in terms of like caring for yourself.
Yeah.
You could make a meal, have more time to make your meals at home. You could get, a little bit of movement in.
Yeah.
You could meditate. Like there's just on either side, 30 minutes is a huge lifestyle change.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like I'm so excited because I'm like, it's not working. Even school, if we're being honest, hasn't worked for a long time. And we just haven't had the forced situation to really restructure it. But like,
yeah, give it another look.
Yeah. I mean, kids getting up at 6 a.m. to be at school by 7:30 or whatever, like, it's not healthy for them. They don't even come online until 8 o'clock or 8:30 or whatever it is. I don't know the specific time, but it's like everybody's just kind of been punching the clock and it been another cog in the wheel. And it's like, ultimately, this system hasn't been really optimized for anybody but the system, but this just machine.
Yeah.
So like, I think it's amazing.
Yeah. It gave it a good shake. And now everybody's like, well, wait a minute. Maybe this isn't the way it has to be. It's interesting. Like for kids, especially for small kids, they're probably going to need some sort of in-person thing, like 5-year-olds are kind of hard to get them to stare at a computer and learn that way, but like older kids and stuff like that, at past like 12, 13, 14, they can sit in front of a computer for part of the day,
Yeah. Well, I think that's what some of them are doing anyway. Right. So it's like, all we really have are like our nieces and nephews, but they spend a significant amount of time on like a tablet, so like when they're in school, they're sitting in a desk on a tablet, and you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. You could be doing that at home,
Wow. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I think like a lot of it is just, and there are definitely some weird permutations of this that are showing up. So like, for example, one of our people is a teacher and she is being required to, even though all of their students are remote, the teachers are required to go to school to teach remotely. So they go to school to teach, but the kids, there's no kids there. You know what I mean? So you're like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and make this like halfway lame. You know what I mean? I gotta think there's got to be like a union thing in there for sure.
Wow.
But
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm like the least qualified person to weigh in on this, but that's never stopped me before. But when I look at it from a layman's point of view, I just think like, okay, for one, if you have smaller classroom sizes, if you have 5, 6, even 10 kids, you don't need to probably be in school as many hours, right? Because the teacher can work more intensively with the kids and really give them that one-on-one attention. So it's like, it makes perfect sense to me that parents would form these pods where they have, 5 or 10 kids, then they hire a teacher. And like, I think it would be so amazing if the funding went back to the parents, and they could actually hire teachers, find their little pod of 5, 10 students, and then their kids could be in school probably half the time, which leaves more time for them to actually be healthy kids, like to actually be in their bodies, to be in nature, to play, to do all the things that kids need to be doing.
That's interesting. It's like small group homeschooling.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a cool idea, actually.
I think it would be so amazing. And in fact, we were out in Puerto Rico visiting with our friends, and my friend was trying to do this exact thing. She was trying to find a teacher and a few kids of the same age. And she was having a bit of a struggle just because of the area in Puerto Rico they're in. But like, I think for the US, think about how many more jobs that would create. Teachers would probably get paid better, and they would have more flexibility. So like for me, again, total layman's terms and like someone who's ill qualified to have an opinion, but it just feels like that would be such a better life for everyone, for
that's
the
a really
teachers.
Interesting idea.
Yeah.
I already just built an app in my head that would help organize that whole thing.
Right?
Well, that's handy.
Love That's
What-
very handy.
Let's see let's see, what can't you call it? Let's see. Simify.
No, can't call it that.
Similarity.
No if I.
Singularity. Yeah,
No more if I names.
that would be funny. Yeah, dude, the whole thing is a total trip to me, right? So like a trip to me,
Tryptamine.
which is
Not a tryptamine.
not a trip to me. They're different. But I do think, so like when I worked for the state, it was possible to telecommute is what they called it, right? But it was like these very specific circumstances, and there was all of this stuff around it, but it was doable. Like our senior personnel specialist telecommuted from some distance away. And like with all of these kind of jobs, you're like, yeah, what does it really matter? Like why do they need to be in this place? And the one thing, and so like that got me thinking, right? And I was like, well, with the exception of the fires, like I could do my job from home. You know what I mean? Like this is like exception to like the whole thing where you got to go and put out fires. Like the entire thing, all the administrative stuff, all of that stuff. And in fact, 90% of the time I did do it from home because when you're super busy, you don't have time for all the administrative stuff. So on your days off, you're doing it all from home.
Right.
And I think that probably is the same way for a lot of people. They end up taking it home because there's just like this massive overload of kind of bureaucratic, shenanigans that go on in a lot of jobs, TPS reports and all.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's an interesting thing to consider. Like and I think some of it has to do with a mindset around work,
Mm-hmm.
and there's certain people, and I don't necessarily know if it's a generational thing or what, but there's people that are like, well, you just can't trust people to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If I'm not here or if they're not here where I can keep an eye on them, I can't trust them to do their job. And I mean, maybe there are certain circumstances where that's true, but man, I'll tell you, the thing that's been like the most clear to me through that all the time is like, if you don't have a way to determine whether or not your employee is meeting their goals without you literally standing there watching them, you're failing as a supervisor. Like you did not do a good job of establishing what that job is 100%. And how it should be measured. 100%. And it's like, so stop fucking around. Like stop penalizing your employees. Mm-hmm. No, you have to come in because I don't know how else to know if you're doing your work than if I can look over my cubicle and see that you're here.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like, get your shit straight.
100%. There's been actually quite a few books written about this. One of my favorites is Dan Pink's book called Drive. And he talks about all the things that create intrinsic motivation. It's like, how do you motivate people so that they're not motivated by money or like the stick of consequence of some sort? It's like, because creative people, once you get past a certain dollar amount, they found that creative people don't want to think about money. They have intrinsic motivation. And they're like, they studied that and they're like, well, how is that possible? In Dan Pink's book, I'll just save you some time. It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So if you can build those things into the leadership style and the culture of your organization, that's what you get is like, and that right there means that you can have a completely remote culture. You don't have to be watching anybody. But if you have those three things going on in your company's culture, autonomy, purpose, and mastery, meaning like people are autonomous to do whatever they want as long as they're getting their stuff done. But you have to be really clear on their objective and the vision of their job. Mastery is you let people just master what they do and geek out and help them facilitate learning of their job and just master their job because they love it and they're passionate about it. And purpose as well, like mastery and purpose kind of go hand in hand. So if you feel that purpose of your job, exactly why your job is important, you're able to master it and feel amazing and like be really good at it. And you're completely autonomous and people just tell you what the objective is, what the outcome should be. And you can do whatever you want in order to get there. That's how it's working in places that are fully remote. That's how it's working at Philosophy. Yeah. That's, how Marco and I made it work at Vimify. We never had an office, And so it's very interesting to me to be able to be productive anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So in your mind that, how do I want to couch this? So how you kind of coupled purpose and mastery together, right? In that thing.
I think they overlap a little bit in the Venn diagram, but they're slightly different. Yeah.
Yeah. So in Deep Work, Cal Newport's book, he talks about mastery being sort of the genesis of purpose, or purpose being an emergent property of mastery, or of deep work, right? This like you're so engaged in the task at hand that you're in flow state, essentially, right?
Exactly.
So it's the whole stir principle and all of that stuff. And that purpose emerges from that whole thing. So what do you think about that?
I think purpose is just, I mean, definitely, like if you think about like your personal purpose would emerge from that, or the purpose of like almost like purpose. You can think about purpose in two ways. The purpose that has been given to you, like this is the purpose of this job. Like this job is important and it fits into this bigger vision. Here's how it fits into this bigger vision. And so you're very clear on the purpose of what you as a person are doing in the larger organization. Like when you think about it that way, it's easy for you as an individual contributor to make your own decisions about what's important, about what you should be doing in the moment. So you need less management.
Got it.
So it's like the purpose in the sense of like, just like, why is your job important and what should be the outcomes of my contribution to the job, you know?
Yeah. So it's giving people some agency to why what they're doing is important. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And that is such an important aspect. Like people need to understand the plan to the degree that they know where they fit in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I mean, and that trickles down to like everything.
And that's just good leadership, you know? Yeah. It's like, I mean, you either micromanage somebody, which takes a lot of work and it's tons of stress and it's super annoying, or you just do the work up front to install purpose and what they're doing. And then you have to do a lot less micromanaging.
Yeah, it's also, I think, kind of tees up another important thing, which is that people, like, we really need to be in integrity about the jobs that we take and the things that we step into and the roles that we step into. Because if we're not intrinsically motivated by the tasks or by the work, or we don't have like some connection or passion to the work, like it becomes much more difficult, right? To create that deep work or that flow state, because you may not be like necessarily deeply interested in it. And I think that like, this is what's really going to come forth, I think right now in this time of remote work, is that if folks aren't deeply interested in their work and don't have an intrinsic commitment, it's going to be really difficult to perform their tasks because they're not going to be truthfully dedicated to it. But what comes with that is that we, I think, as a society have for so long forced ourselves into places that we don't truly identify with, or we're not truly passionate about.
Exactly.
And we have to start looking at like those systems all the way to the root matter, is like, are you really passionate about how you spend this precious life force that is yours? Or are you doing it just because it's just to pay the bills, or it's just to like put food on the table, which are important things, don't get me wrong. But in the end, like, this is an opportunity to start considering like, what is the kind of work that you really want to fill your days with, and that you can give passion and you can give high quality output to, because you're intrinsically motivated by the content and the context of what you're doing. And I think that like, it's just so important that people, as we're moving forward in this whole remote work thing and this whole world as it's evolving, to give yourself permission to like tune into that. Like, am I actually interested in what I do? And if all work's going to be remote at some point, like maybe there's an ability to go more lateral with and find things that you really are motivated to do and create. And that's again what gets me excited about this whole shakeup right now, is that like, it's uncomfortable because you might be like, oh shit, I actually don't really like my job, and when I'm at home and I have to do it, I'm not super motivated to do it because I don't really like it. But the good news is, like, as more and more companies go remote, you can think like, okay, what is it that I am really passionate about? And I mean, again, I'm an optimist, so I get like excited about this, but I think that there's a lot to be excited for.
When I graduated college, I was a computer science major, and I wanted to be an engineer and do all that. And the job opportunities back in Spokane were not that good. And so that was my excuse why I didn't move back to Spokane with my family where I grew up. Cause I'm like, there's nothing happening in this town. I'm not going to be able to get a job. I'm not going to get paid. Like, I wanted more money, all those things, and that's not an excuse for me anymore, So now, like, you can do anything you want with technology and the internet and remote work and all the things wherever you want.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting concept. And what is that going to bring in the future?
Mm-hmm.
When you think about how are we going to live? What kind of communities are we going to build?
Right. Little pod
how,
communities with really good internet.
Yeah. Really.
A lot of traveling communities,
conscious
too.
Communities, like, great friends are going to build compounds, and live together just because they can. Like, why not? And, I think that traveling and work is going to be more tightly coupled, because you'll be able to work in Mykonos for, a few hours a day and then just go explore.
Yeah.
You'll be able to go down to Mexico and, go on a surf retreat that the surfing ends at 10 a.m. and then you're working for the rest of the day, and it's just like coupling like work and exploring and just kind of chipping away at your bucket list while you're working and being productive is a very interesting concept to me.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, you just imagine like your daily grind, right? So it's like you get up in the morning and this is going to be totally different and probably like arguably more complex with people with children, but like without kids, you get up in the morning and you go and you work out and then you do whatever your morning little routine is, shit, shower, shave, breakfast, and then you're on the computer, and you grind away at that. And then maybe you stop and you eat lunch, and then maybe you eat a second lunch. And then like there's something that happens in the afternoon and it's like 8 p.m. by the time you're finally done with like all of the shenanigans of the day, And it's like, there's no, like, maybe you got to go outside, like you got to go outside and work out, but maybe you get to go and cruise and do something at night. But it's like, if a walk in nature is a 15-minute drive away, 20-minute drive away, you're probably not going to do it, at the end of the day. But like, if you take that whole situation and like you said, you put it in Baja, you get up in the morning and it's like you go and you surf in the morning and then you get your work done and then you just step outside and you're in nature. You're somewhere different. You're like exploring and like the stuff that we talk about all the time, like this, be adventurous, right? It's like, if you can just bake that stuff into the cake, and you're not, it's like you don't have to take vacation time because you're still working. You're just doing it from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
It's interesting.
It's going to get cool. Things are going to get cool around here when the robots take over.
Well, and it's something that we've been talking about the last few months, like helping people with this work immersion, like these working weeks, these reset weeks. And it's something that we hope to bring this winter out to people's, like actually allowing people the space to do this, come work, come train, come meditate, maybe surf, maybe get in the ocean. And I think it's like people almost need an opportunity to learn how to do that. Like how does that even look? How does working remotely, how do I still get stuff done and integrate all this stuff into my world? And luckily we've been working on mastering that recently.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I mean, even like, honestly, even just our life in Venice was kind of that way to a large degree. It's like because we didn't commute, we always worked from home. So it's like you just build in all of the stuff into your day. And it is interesting, having, speaking with our clients and stuff, we're like, okay, well, all right, let's talk about your schedule. Like, how are you going to get this done for your day? We're like, well, I got up at this time and I guess I got to do this. And it's a 2-hour drive to work and it's and you're like, oh man, your day is really full. Like there's just not that much time in there when you add in all of the freaking travel. Like at the end of the day, that's what a lot of it is. It's like the back and forth to here to there. And then I got to run over here and I got to bounce over here to do this thing. And it's like all of that time just eats up your day.
Oh man.
And like the other thing that eats up your day, and this is probably, so my prediction on this is that this is going to get dramatically worse for a while, and then it's going to improve. And that is bullshit meetings. Like bullshit meetings eat up more of your time and like creative capacity than anything in the world. They are a energy suck, like so bad. And there's nothing worse than a remote bullshit meeting, you know, and like that's going to get dramatically worse for a while as like the hangers on of like, well, how do I keep tabs on my people if we don't have a morning meeting? Derp, 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 which is just really a bullshit session because we don't really know what we're doing either. You know what I mean? Like that all like that's going to have to fade and die. And until it does, that's going to be a significant problem, you know, but it'll go away eventually because everybody knows that they're bullshit meetings, even the people that order, like call them and schedule them.
Yeah.
That's my take.
No more bullshit meetings.
Yeah.
Well, we're already at an hour.
I know.
Those times just fun when you're flying. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, I talked about a lot of something. Ben talked about a lot of something. Like, what do you got?
Well, I guess I could talk a little bit about Soul Quest because I haven't talked about that yet. And I did want to give a little tip my hat to that experience. Let's see, what was that, about a month ago?
What was it?
So Soul Quest is an ayahuasca retreat in Florida. Orlando, Florida, and they actually just got their DEA exemption, so they're like fully legal, like doing the damn thing. Yeah,
in the U.S.
In the U.S.
Are they the first?
Yep. So I don't know. Actually, I think Santo Daime, that church, has been able to do stuff, and they're a church also. Soul Quest is a church, and they've been able to get their DEA exemption through that, and. You know, we've been trying to go to Rhythmia for however long and it's closed. The borders have been closed. And after Penelope passed away and just kind of a whole bunch of stuff, my mom's house sold, just a lot of closure. You know, it was actually really beautiful. One of our friends just said, hey, I want to gift you this retreat to Soul Quest, which was like not even on my radar. So it was just really a beautiful offering. And I went with two of my other good girlfriends and it was really amazing. And what I love about it is that it's in America. Like you can do it. It's 2 nights. You go in and it's Friday night. You do ceremony. Saturday, you can do a daytime ceremony, which I highly recommend. And Saturday night, you can do another ceremony. So you're kind of really in ceremony almost like for 36 hours. At least I was. I was super in the medicine pretty much the whole time. Wow. So you're kind of just like in and out of it. Yeah, it was like a pretty deep journey for me. And, you know, ultimately, like I would say that the Rhythmia experience is a much different experience. And it's like, if you really want to have a full week of experience and you really want to have, it's hard to say like the full Rhythmia experience. There's no supplement for that, or there's no substitution for that. But what I love about Soul Quest is that like you can get it done. Like you can just get in there and get it done. And it's 2 nights and you're in and out, and it's in America for people who feel more comfortable with that. And, you know, it was a beautiful thing. So yeah, I just really, I really appreciated. And I think one of the things that I really appreciated the most was that you could see there was a lot of vets there. And they have a huge emphasis on, you know, PTSD and helping veterans. And it was actually really, really beautiful to see these guys working through their stuff. And that was actually the most profound thing that I think I got from Soul Quest was like, wow, these guys are going through it and they're showing up to do this major work and this major healing. And that was really moving and really touching. And just to see that alone was worth the trip. To be there and see that, because I think that like they uniquely kind of have a corner on that experience. So, yeah. So, I mean, it was just a really, again, the medicine is good to me. Mama speaks my language.
Yeah. She's funny. Yeah. I believe they have some kind of a partnership, or at least like a working relationship with VET, which is the Veterans for Entheogenic Therapy, which is cool. They're like a nonprofit that's basically trying to like get these guys into the medicine, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and the situation is that they go for completely free, like 100% free. And I think Soul Quest comps them their experience, and I think Vet helps with the airfare and the transport and all the miscellaneous stuff so that they can truly go for free.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really incredible. And that part of it to me was really special. And I would actually like to get involved in that side of it, because I'm telling you, like, watching these guys go through it is heartbreaking, beautiful, inspiring, terrifying at times. Like, it's all of the things, but it's just really beautiful, because you're like, I think for the world to really heal, the soldiers have to heal. The warriors of the world have to heal. Like, we can't leave them behind, and we can't just like leave the warriors out there to suffer in perpetuity for the sins of mankind, or for the just, the experience of mankind. Warring is just at this point still part of our human experience. And I think to have them heal is a huge input to the collective consciousness of what that warrior spirit is and how we really work with it. So I don't know. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I have a question about that whole thing. So as far as like, and you're right, it does kind of suck to like compare to Rhythmia, but we talk about Rhythmia all the time. Yeah, so it's like, it's kind of one of those things. I'm just trying to think of like the kind of person, right, who might be more attracted to going to this place versus Rhythmia, even though, like, take the international travel component out of it. But like, is there like, who would it be right for from that perspective? Like, regardless of travel or anything like that, like, what's the kind of vibe?
I mean, honestly, I think just someone who is short on time and like wants to get in there and get it done, and just doesn't necessarily need all the hand holding and all of the, I mean, they do offer support. There's phone calls and there's groups and there is support. But you're not intrinsically like in it, in your process there on the property, where it's like Rhythmia baby steps you through it. They really give you like they set you up to really integrate every step of the way. Whereas I feel like Soul Quest is like, you kind of are thrown into it, and then it's like go time, you get in there and you go. And then the integration is going to be really after the fact. If you sign into one of their programs, or you work with one of their coaches, or you do some of the offerings that they have afterwards, which I'm not super clear on because I didn't participate in those. But so I know they're offering things, but Rhythmia, it's like you're kind of getting it all in one at the location. And then, afterwards, of course, at Rhythmia, it's great to have integration as well. And that's usually folks who've come with us. We always offer the Authentic Self program because it's really a great integration. And I'm actually offering some other types of integration now too. But I think that that's like, for me, the big thing. So to put it like bluntly, if you want to get in there and get it done and you're not worried like about the extra support, you could probably just go in there and do it and be good with it. But if you feel like, okay, I'm nervous, this is my first time, I want more support, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm like, I want a little extra, I think Rhythmia has a more detailed experience, and it's longer, it's a whole week.
Yeah. And if you want like a vacation,
yes,
Rhythmia is the spot. Yeah.
And that's the thing I'll add, is that the accommodation, there's no comparing the like quality. Like again, Soul Quest is like about just getting in there and getting it done. There are a couple nicer rooms, I think, but Rhythmia is like it's a real resort. It's a retreat. It's an experience. It's a high level and high dollar experience. So that's the other thing. If you don't have the resources necessarily to go to Rhythmia financially or even time wise, then I think Soul Quest is an awesome alternative.
What are the price points of the two?
So I think Soul Quest, all said and done, is about $1,200, and Rhythmia is like well, actually their prices, and I will say this to folks out there, their prices have gone up. They used to be $3,000 for a triple room, $3,900 for a double room. And I know it's more expensive now, but our next retreat with them, we actually get grandfathered into their old pricing. So if you are thinking about going, if you sign up with us, you get their old pricing, which is,
Oh, sweet.
yeah, $3,000 to $3,900. Because I think it's somewhere in the like neighborhood of 35 to 45 now. So yeah, it's not cheap, but
Not cheap.
it's not cheap, but you know, luxury experiences typically
It's all
aren't.
inclusive.
It's all inclusive.
Yeah.
It's 7 days. You get a massage, you get all your meals. I mean, you get, yeah, not colonoscopies, hydrocolon therapy, colonics. Yeah. Yep.
Conjugal visits.
No,
What?
actually, no conjugal visits.
Oh yeah,
No
they're
sex.
not supposed to. That's not in the dieta.
It's not in the dieta. But, you know, so I guess when you look at it as a whole package, it's not that expensive for everything that's included. But, you know, it's going to cost a lot more money and time to go there for sure.
So if you guys haven't picked up on it, our travel get up only has 2 microphones. So Ben has one, and Vanessa and I are swinging one back and forth to each other, and it's kind of funny because it's like she's talking, then Ben's talking, and I just grab the mic and swing it over to my face, and Vanessa's like, "Okay, I guess."
But in that
it's not my
case,
turn."
Vanessa was done talking,
Yeah,
and she just gave it
swung
to
it to me.
swung it to Adam, and we're all staring at Adam. He's like, "Oh, am I supposed to talk?"
Okay, let's land this plane. I think we're done. We're an hour and 16 minutes in, and we still got to make dinner.
Yeah.
So we love you all. It's been fantastic to catch up with Benjamin. I hope you
Yeah.
guys enjoyed hearing about his shenanigans. And how do people find you on Instagram? Because your Instagram's pretty good.
My Instagram? It is Ben_McMaster.
McMaster of the universe.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Ben_McMaster. No. That's my Twitter.
Oh,
Instagram is just Ben McMaster.
Ben
No
McMaster.
underscore. No underscore. Just Ben McMaster.
get at him, dog.
Dog.
We love you, Jammin. It's been awesome hanging with you.
It's been
After
so good.
like such a Benjamin diet, I was starved.
It was so nice to just have some serious quality time.
Yeah.
Like probably the most quality time we've ever had. It's
Yep.
been in these couple days.
Yeah. Thank you, COVID. Once again.
Well, yeah. Thanks changing of the lifestyles. you know.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm glad that we were able to cross paths
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. In the trees.
Mhm.
Yeah. Love you, buddy.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.